Great. So, as you've heard, my name is Michael Cook, and I come from Cognizant, and I head up Cognizant's Center for the Future of Work. Now, before we jump right into today's topic, let me first tell you a little bit more about what I do and who I do it for. So, show of hands, who here has heard of Cognizant? One, two, few of you. Okay, not too many. Now, that's not the biggest surprise in the world. We're actually one of the IT world's best kept secrets. We have 285,000 members of staff that work for us. We operate globally, and we have revenues approaching $17 billion. And we're featured on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange, and we're probably one of the we are the second top performing IT stock. So when it comes to the IT services world, we have been there and we've done it for over 25 years now. And we're just entering the African market right now. So it's a great honor to be able to speak to you, especially at an audience, or to an audience of this quality, and of course of the size. I'm blown away by the size of the audience here. I was speaking downstairs, the HR in Durban previously today, and it's fantastic to see this. So as you can hear, I am South African, but I now live in the UK. I've been over there for about 9 years, and I always enjoy coming back. So today what I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about finance's jobs of the future. We've had some fantastic sessions today where we've found out about how AI, how blockchain, how some of these new digital technologies can be used within finance to drive new revenue streams. But today, to end off, what I want to be speaking to you about is what type of jobs we're going to be doing in the future. Let's look at the technology. Let's identify how it's changing our world in finance and in business as a whole. But let's also look at what this future of technology means for us as finance professionals. Are we going to have jobs moving forward? And if we are, what are they going to be? So without further ado, let's jump right in. And let's talk about this man. Now, why am I speaking about a cyclist? Well, believe it or not, many, many years ago, and unfortunately many kilograms ago, I used to be a professional cyclist. So I used to do this for a living. And this guy over here was one of my idols. His name is Tom Bonen, Belgium cyclist. And he's widely considered one of the best single-day racers in the world. And in 2016, he was the favorite to win one of the toughest bicycle races on the global calendar, called Paris-Roubaix. Now, Paris-Roubaix is a race of 260 kilometers long. 60 kilometers of that is across some of the toughest, gnarliest roads, cobbled roads in Europe. And his nickname actually is the Hell of the North. And in 2016, Tom Bonen was a favorite to win it. He didn't, though. He ended up coming second, and he lost to this man over here, Matthew Hayman, an Australian no less. Now, this victory utterly shocked the cycling world. And it shocked the cycling world for two specific reasons. The first is that Matthew Hayman is not a race winner. Cycling teams consist of many different players. You've got race winners, guys like Tom Bonen, but then you've got people who help out, guys like Matthew Hayman. Their job is to go and collect bottles, protect their leader from the wind, and help dictate tactics. So he shouldn't have been there to win the race, but he did. And then secondly, and more astonishingly, is he wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place. Because 6 weeks prior to this event, he broke his arm in a training accident. But what we saw in the intervening 6 weeks was one of the greatest comebacks in modern sporting history. Over the course of those 6 weeks, Matthew Hayman set up an indoor trainer in his garage, put his bicycle on it, put a ladder in front of him, rested his broken arm on a ladder, and he rode. He rode 1,600 kilometers and was able to train with the intensity needed to win one of the toughest races in the world. Now, come on. All of us here today have probably done a spinning class. We've sat on an indoor trainer. We've used a stationary bike at the gym. It's hellish. Half an hour. It's crazy. It's the part of my training that I used to hate the most. But he did it. And the reason he was able to do those types of miles and that type of time on the bike was due to the fact that he didn't train alone. He trained with over 100,000 other athletes from across the world. And of course, there wasn't a conveyor belt of cyclists coming in and out of his garage over 6 weeks. What he utilized was the power of platforms. And the platform he utilized in this case was Swift. This essentially links cyclists from across the globe and allows them to train and race together in a simulated virtual environment. And of course, we saw the power of this platform with him winning the Hell of the North. But of course, it's not just kept to cycling. These new platforms are now a new machine for work, and they are dictating how we derive value in our organizations today, and they've been doing this over the last 10 years. One of the platforms that we know and utilize today is LinkedIn. But now what exactly are these platforms? We know they're LinkedIn. We know they're platforms like Swift. But very simply put, these platforms can be defined as layers of software that gather and synthesize code through them. So of course, bearing that in mind, companies are actually now competing on this code. Now you notice I don't use the word data. We define, or we divide code from data because code is more holistic. Code is the data that surrounds every person, every process, and every instrument within an organization. And using this code and some fundamental technologies, companies are now creating and competing on platforms. And the technology stack they're using to create these platforms is the SMAC stack. Now this is a term of software that we defined back in 2012. And what does it stand for? Well, the S, social, the M, mobile, the A is analytics, and the C is cloud, the SMAC stack. Over the last 10 years, companies have been using SMAC to create their platforms and to derive true business value. And the figures play this out. So last year alone, companies, global organizations, were able to derive $978 billion of revenue purely off the back of platforms. And if we follow the money, next year alone, we expect companies globally to spend $1.6 trillion into these emerging technologies. So if we follow the money, this is where we need to go in the business world. And of course, if we look at the major organizations around the world, well, they're no longer companies that produce widgets or oil, mine oil. Now the top 7 companies globally by market cap are all data-led platform organizations. This is the way our modern working world is changing and arriving in Industry 4.0. But where's next? If you look at this chart over here, this chart shows you the tail end of each industrial revolution we've experienced up until this point. So we had loom and textiles, steam and rail, oil and mass production, and now we're in Industry 4.0, which is defined by computing and digital. And you'll notice that we're right at the start of this stage of industry revolution. We're about 8-9 years in right now. But how do we move up? How do we jump up that exponential GDP cycle that we see in front of us? Well, it's not going to be through the SMAC stack, that's for sure. There's a new breed of technology that's going to change the way we live and breathe moving forward. And I call it the ABEC stack of technologies. The ABEC stack of technologies can be defined by artificial intelligence, blockchain or distributed ledgers, enhanced reality. Now, I'm not talking about virtual or augmented. This is full immersion technology that combines touch, taste, sound, hearing, and sight. And then lastly, quantum computing. What's fascinating is many people still think quantum computing is science fiction. Right now, Google has just proved quantum superiority, which means that now quantum computers are more powerful than the most powerful binary computer on the planet. This is now a reality, and we're starting to see organizations use quantum. But out of all of these pieces of tech, one rings true, and one is going to have the greatest impact on our society that we have ever seen over the last 3 millennia. And the technology I'm referring to here was artificial intelligence. This is one of the most divisive and one of the most impactful technologies we will ever see. And of course, people around the world, well, they all have a different view of what it means. World leaders or industry leaders, such as Elon Musk, he views this as one of the greatest threats to humanity that we've ever faced. And there are headlines around the world extolling that same view. But then there are also people who see the inherent possibilities and promise that this technology will bring in. Whatever your view is, what can't be denied is that AI is going to be the greatest story of our time. Our children will actually learn about this point in human history because the rise of AI is going to mean the very reason and the very means by which our children will live and work the way they do in years to come. But let's get back to the concern around this technology. Why ultimately are people so concerned about it? Well, this is something that we think about every single day. In the Center for the Future of Work, we look 5 to 10 years ahead of business, and we identify the latest social, microeconomic trends that are shaping the future of work. So these are the type of things that myself and my colleagues think about every single day. And we ask ourselves the same question. And what we found is that it's a multifaceted reason why people are so concerned about it, but it comes down to one core component, and that's the rate of change. And to really bring this to life, let's talk about this example, because this demonstrates this very, very neatly. So who here has heard of the Chinese game Go? Show of hands, anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4 of us. Okay, great, more than usual. So Go is an ancient Chinese strategy game. It's widely considered the most complex strategic game on the planet. So just as a comparison, on a chessboard, in an optimal position, when you've got your pawns out, etc., you have around 400 next possible moves. On a Go board, however, you have 130,000 next possible moves. So if you extrapolate those figures out, you come to this figure over here, 2.08 times 10 to the power of 170. Now, I'll get a beer for anybody that can pronounce that figure. That is the total number of moves on a Go board, and it exceeds the number of atoms in the known universe. Absolutely blows my mind whenever I hear that. But now we have a problem. Now we have a huge problem. We want to beat a human at a game of Go. How do we do it? Because there's no computer on the planet that is strong enough or fast enough to deal with those types of numbers. So now we need a different solution. We need to be able to understand the strategy. We need to be able to understand the context of the game, and we need to be able to understand our opponent. And it was this very problem that was posed to industry professionals in the field of AI back in 2014. And the best minds in the field, they came back and they said, yes, we can do it. But we're 20 years away from having the technology to actually do this. That was back in 2014. Anyway, Google's team at DeepMind, they had another idea. And over the course of 2 years, they developed their system called AlphaGo. They taught it to play the game. And in 2016, AlphaGo played 5 games of Go against Lee Sedol, the current world champion and world master at this game. And it beat him 4 games to 1. So that wasn't just a victory, that was an utter trouncing. Already, this technology was 10 times ahead of where it should have been, according to the best and brightest minds in the world. Now this example, many of us might have heard of it. This has been written about, there are books. If you go onto Netflix right now, you can watch the documentary, but there's a follow-on that even further brings home this point. And this follow-on is actually even more astounding. So Google's team at DeepMind, they weren't happy. They went away after this and they said, we can do better. He won 1 game, that's not acceptable. So what they did is they took their AlphaGo system, already the most powerful Go player on the planet, and they rejigged it. They embedded something called deep learning methodology within the platform. Over the course of 12 months, taught it to play again. And at the end of that 12 months, the back end of 2017, AlphaGo 0 played 100 games against AlphaGo. Now, who wants to guess the outcome of that? What was the score? I had 60, 40. It was 100 games to 0. That is how far this technology had leapfrogged again within 12 months. And this is one of the very reasons why we are so concerned about what this will mean for us. Speed brings uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds fear. And right now, we are starting to see the way AI is catalyzing amongst business. In the Nasdaq Stock Exchange last year, 8 out of the 10 top-performing funds, they were AI-led investment portfolios. In radiologist, or in medicine, a radiologist with 10, 20 years of experience, well, he or she could diagnose an X-ray with an 82% accuracy rate. An AI system can do it with a 100% accuracy rate, or very close to. That differential of 18%, well, think about it. That could mean the difference between life and death for somebody that we know. And then in the legal sector, a crack team of paralegals in Sandton, New York, Amsterdam, they would take around 2 weeks in the discovery process for a major trial, gathering case data. An AI system now is doing that in 2 hours. It's making that data more searchable and more usable than those paralegals ever could. And then in the banking world, American banks right now are using AI in their credit processing facilities. They are able to process 12,000 credit agreements every 10 seconds, as opposed to the 360,000 hours it takes humans to do that same job. So what do you take away from this? Well, I take away 2 things. The first is that we can finally do a lot more with a lot less. We've been promised productivity improvements through digital technologies for decades now. And by and large, we haven't seen what we expected. Now we're going to see what we're expecting. We're going to see those productivity improvements come in spades and buckets. The next is a slightly more worrying component. Because no longer are we automating away rote repetitive work, we're now augmenting and automating away highly advanced white-collar work. And it's not even workers that are now being augmented away through the use of artificial intelligence. Let me tell you about this company. Deep Knowledge Ventures is a Hong Kong-based venture capitalist firm. And they had an issue. They had 4 members on their board, and they were reaching a deadlock in decision-making for new investment opportunities. So what do? Well, you do what anybody else would do. Make it an uneven number. Go hire a new member to the board. So they did that. They hired a new member to the board. It wasn't a human, however. Its name is Vital. It's an artificial intelligence-led system, and it has equal voting rights on the board. So now even leadership is becoming more data-driven and augmented through the use of artificial intelligence and smart automation. But again, how does this make you feel? Is this a technical wonder? Is this the art of the possible? Or does this start to fill you with a sense of fear about what's coming? Is this going to change company structures? Is it going to force out middle and senior levels of management? Ultimately, are we as a society heading for a capitalist dream of bloated profits and bloated revenues, but a worker's nightmare? Well, if you read the newspapers, you might think exactly that. There are headlines like this all over our newspapers right now. 47% of jobs could disappear in the next 25 years due to artificial intelligence. And that was from Oxford University. That wasn't some poxy research institute. So ultimately, are we heading for a jobless future in South Africa, in finance in particular, maybe in Africa and the rest of the world? And what are we actually going to do when machines do everything? Well, again, in the Center for the Future of Work, we asked ourselves exactly that. Now you must forgive us. We are an ex-bunch of industry analysts from the likes of Gartner, Forrester, IDC. We have no sense of humor, so we wrote a book, and we titled it exactly that: What to Do When Machines Do Everything. Because we just didn't buy what we saw in the media. So we thought we'd go and we'd do our own study. We went away and we interviewed 2,000 business leaders from major organizations around the world, the guys who are actually using AI right now. We then spoke to 1,500 middle and senior levels of management from some of those same organizations. We spoke to 500 MBA students. We spoke to hundreds and hundreds of job market experts, AI professionals, who are really getting to grips with this technology now. And we started running a data set. And this is how we see the future of jobs playing out over the next 25 years. Firstly, there will be job loss. It's not 47% though, it's 12%. Secondly, and most importantly, the vast majority of jobs are going to remain. Nearly all of us here will have a job, and it could exactly be the same job, maybe, moving forward, but they're going to look very different. Ultimately, man and machine are going to work together to create new value streams of productivity. And in the short term, that's going to be great for us in this room. Think about the horrible work we all do every single day. Data entry into spreadsheets, expense reports, timesheets, trying to match calendars with people outside of our organization. Horrible, rote, repetitive work that adds no value. That is going to disappear, and it's disappearing now. Over the next 5 years, we should see nearly 90% of rote work like that disappear. And it's going to free up time for us to do work that's interesting, that matters, that's collaborative, that's innovative, and it's creative. And then lastly, and most importantly, is we're going to see new jobs. We're going to see a 13% net job creation off the back of digital technologies. Now, why? Why are we going to see that? Well, to understand why, we need to step back. We need to step back in time, over 200 years, and we need to look at something called the budding effect. Now, has anybody heard of the budding effect before? No. Okay, well, it's an economic term, and it was started by this man, Mr. Edwin Budding. He lived in Gloucester in England. It's quite close to where I live, in the early 19th century. And he invented the world's first lawnmower. You might not think much of it, but at the time, mowing a lawn was a hugely costly experience or experiment. You needed teams of people, maybe that many people to mow a lawn, all armed with glorified kitchen scissors. It was an absolute nightmare, and it cost a lot, and it was time-consuming. Only the wealthy of the wealthy could afford a mown lawn, and it was a sign of the aristocracy at the time. But Mr. Edwin Budding, he democratized that service. And through the democratization of one invention, the lawnmower, it gave birth to the $350 billion sports industry that we know and watch today. So just think about that. One invention gave birth to an industry that today employs millions of people directly, indirectly employs tens of millions of people, and globally affects billions of lives every single day. And of course, it's not just lawnmowers. We've seen the same thing with railways. Railways gave us open markets, commodity mining, and electricity. But then in turn, electricity gave us telecommunications, the movie industry, radio, television, the transistor. If history holds, the digital revolution, of which AI is a component, well, it's going to drive the largest budding effect we have ever seen in human history. It's going to create jobs, but also industries by 2045 that we simply don't foresee today. So with that in mind, let's actually look at what these jobs are going to be. So I told you we wrote that book, What to Do and Machines Do Everything. And this is where we got to. We got to the end of that book, and this is where we stopped. But we thought, we're leaving people on a cliff edge here. What's next? So we went away and we studied the latest macro, micro, socio-economic trends. And we started identifying jobs of the future. And the back end of 2017, we published the first report, 21 jobs of the future. End of last year, 21 more jobs of the future. So we now have 42 jobs that we see occurring over the next 10 years. And these two papers, well, they've really captured the media's attention. They've been featured in Time magazine, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and more recently at the World Economic Forum in Davos has published research. And the reason is we actually name and shame the jobs that we see coming to fruition. We tell you when they're going to occur and how tech-centric they're going to be. And this brings me to another point. When I talk about the future of work, everybody assumes the future of work is technical. Everybody needs to be an AI expert. Everybody needs to be a blockchain specialist. And that is simply not the case. The future of work is inherently human. Of course, there will be technical jobs, but there are going to be very human jobs moving forward. So let's look at some of these jobs. We don't have too much time left, so let's identify the three categories that these jobs fall into. And we call them the 3 C's. Now, these 3 C's are going to be what will define work over the next 10 years. And they speak to some human truths that we see coming to fruition. And they are coaching, caring, and connecting. Now, why coaching? Well, as we've identified, modern technology is changing the way we derive value around us. So think about the platforms. Think about Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet. These companies have now changed the rule book. And ultimately, we as individuals, but also as organizations, need to be coached on how best to utilize these technologies to our own benefits, but also to the benefit of our organization. And then on the flip side to that, many of these technologies need to be coached themselves. Then caring. Nearly all of these technologies are here to inherently improve the way we live, to make our employee experience better, to make our customer experience better. So we need to make sure that they still deliver on that, and that's not interfered with in any way. And then conversely, caring is also particularly important because we as humans are getting older. A great study we put out recently showed that the first people to live to 150 years old have already been born. Now that's incredible, blows my mind, but think about what it means for our healthcare systems. Already in South Africa, access to affordable medical care is a huge concern. Where I come from in the UK, the NHS is under huge stress already. In the face of an aging population, that's only going to increase in intensity. And therefore, caring is a hugely important part of our societies. And then lastly, connecting. So we spoke about 75% of jobs being enhanced through the collaboration of human and machine. It's great to say, but how's it going to happen? We're going to need people on the ground matching man and machine together within these roles. So let's look at one job that you might be hiring for in your finance departments, or one job that you actually might be doing in years to come as it relates to finance. So in the coaching bucket, personal data brokers. Right now, our data, it's becoming sovereign. We've got regulations such as GDPR that is changing the way we as society think about our data. And this data we produce every single day. We produce it through our connected devices, we produce it through our interactions on e-commerce, our social interactions, our search history on Google, as well as the data trail we leave in our working lives. But this data, it's valuable. Alphabet, Google, has been making billions off this data for years now. But now there's a flip to this. Individuals and organizations will be able to trade data in years to come. And very, very soon, we'll see personal data brokers sitting within organizations to help derive value for the data that we produce as individuals and as organizations. Then next, in the caring bucket, algorithm bias auditors. We spoke about these algorithms, or AI, and AI is essentially a conglomerate of algorithms. these can be inherently biased, either through the code that they're made under, or by the data that they consume. There was a great example recently of a Twitter chatbot derived or developed by Microsoft that got released on Twitter. And this thing turned into an absolute racist bigot after only 2 hours on the platform, purely due to the data it was consuming. So think about the reputational damage that would have in our organizations, and think about the impact that could have in our finance departments if algorithms were let loose that had that type of bias within them. So therefore, algorithm bias auditors are going to be a key component in the back, middle, and front office of our organizations, but in particular in our finance departments, to make sure that our funds are correctly allocated and correctly distributed. And then lastly is the human or the man-machine manager. Now, this individual is going to sit within business units, and their role is going to be to identify the tasks within roles. Think about your job. What are the individual tasks that make up your job? This professional will identify those tasks, look at the individual, and identify which tasks can and can't be automated away, and which ones need to remain inherently human. This is going to be the new face of your finance department in 5 years, and interestingly enough, they're already hiring for this role right now. This is now a reality. So as you've seen, change is just ahead. But ultimately, we need to not have a fear of the unknown. Instead, we need to have a fascination with the unknown to adapt to these new ways of working. I hope you've identified the fact that we're extremely optimistic about the future of work at Cognizant, but we're not blindly optimistic either. Everything I've discussed today has been based on extremely extensive research and also of anecdotal evidence that we've conducted with our clients. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been fantastic speaking to you.